Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Scott Lavin. I'm the Director of Research and Partnerships for the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports. You may not see or hear him today, but Lance Cherry, our Communications and Marketing Manager, is going to make sure that technology is our friend today. And we want to thank you for joining our webinar on increasing cultural acceptance and support for hunting and target shooting. A couple of housekeeping notes. Because of the size of the webinar, we're going to keep the video and the audio turned off. But if you have questions, we absolutely want to know what they are. So please input any questions in the chat. And after the presentation, we'll start sorting through those. So thank you for your patience with dealing with us on that. Many of you are probably aware of the American Attitudes Towards Hunting and Shooting Sports survey. The council just started producing this study that Mark Duda has done for years. And if you've been paying attention, you've probably noticed in the last couple years that there's been a slight decline in hunting and shooting sports. So it's called A Lot of Our Eyes, and I want to thank the two researchers today who decided to dig in to try and find out the why and tell us what they found. So I'd like to introduce Jim Curcuruto, the Executive Director of Outdoor Stewards for Conservation Foundation. Many of you will probably remember Jim was the Director of Research and Market Development for the National Shooting Sports Foundation. So he brings a wealth of experience and perspective to this topic. And of course, Mark Duda is the Executive Director of Responsive Management. Mark is a certified wildlife biologist and social scientist and holds a master's degree with an emphasis on natural resource policy and planning from Yale University, where he attended on not one, but two academic scholarships. And during the past 35 years, Mark has conducted more than 1,000 studies on how people relate to the outdoors. He's the author of more than 150 journal and popular articles and 4 books on wildlife and outdoor recreation. So I think we're in good hands today. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jim to lead us into the report.
All right. Well, introduce myself. I'll let Mark take control of the PowerPoint and get that pulled up for us. But first and foremost, Scott, Lance, and the council team, thank you very much for the opportunity to get the word out about this research. As you mentioned, I've been doing this for about 15 years and conduct a lot of different research on a lot of different topics. Found some really great insights that we've used to gain knowledge and really move the needle on some topics. But the topic that we're talking about today, really, the needle is moving in the wrong way, right? And we need to reverse that. So the topic of increasing cultural acceptance and support for hunting and target shooting is one that's really reared its head. For me, it was March of 2023. Outdoor Stewards had worked with Responsive Management and Mark and his team there. And, I've been involved in this study that Mark's been doing since 1991. I've been involved in it for the last 8 or so iterations and never thought much of it other than the fact that why wouldn't anybody like, somebody's ability to go hunting or target shooting? Why isn't it 100%? And Mark will get into the numbers where we're at now. But in 2023, when we did that study, we realized for the first time there was a pretty substantial drop. And it kind of scared me enough where, with all the other factors going on at the time, we knew we needed to do something to improve that cultural acceptance. So we'll get into some of the actions that folks can take and some of the recommendations that we have for you guys to take actions as well. And again, Mark, that next slide, as you'll get into, and as Scott referenced, the American Attitudes Toward Legal, Regulated Hunting, Fishing, Trapping, and Shooting, great resource for folks. But, the scary news is lower overall support, and that leads to things like easier ballot box biology for groups not friendly to, our activities of hunting and target shooting. And it really is, again, only one narrative out there that a lot of the general population is hearing, and that is, not pro hunting, fishing, trapping, and shooting. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Is we've done this study, and when we started this study, Mark and his team, did some qualitative work, and then built that into a national survey. And the qualitative work started out with focus groups. And one of the first focus groups we did, I was listening in on, and one of the participants said, when asked about their perceptions of gun ownership, hunting, target shooting, they said three key words, and it really scared the heck out of me. And those words were guilty by association, from a focus group participant when asked about their thoughts on, hunting and target shooting. And of course, Mark and his team dug into that. And what do you mean by guilty by association? They said, I grew up in the city. The only thing I've ever heard about guns is their gun violence. And if you use a gun for any purpose, hunting, target shooting, I equate that to gun violence. Really, it's a scary, scary thought. And we've got dug into that, and we've got great, great data that Mark is going to give us some details. And when Mark's done doing that, we'll get into the actions to take. And then I believe Scott said you can put in your questions in the chat as you go along, and we'll answer your questions at the end. But for that, let's have Mark take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Duda. I'm the Executive Director of Responsive Management. I want to thank the three gentlemen for allowing us to be involved with this project. I've got about 30 minutes worth of data. We really narrowed it down to give you sort of just the meat of this. So we'll hopefully have some time for questions. And it's snowing here in Virginia, so I've got all day. I'm snowed in. So if anybody wants to stay on or anything or call me, that's fantastic. So again, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Kaz. Thanks everyone for being here. So yeah, let's talk about sort of the whole project needs and the purpose and why we did that. And Jim did just a great job in terms of giving that big picture overview. But one of the things that we've seen over the years, in really the past 2 to 3 years, are declines in approval of hunting in several of our national studies, as well as individual studies, Maine, Arizona, Washington, Pennsylvania. And it was really interesting because I'd never seen that before in close to 35 years of monitoring public opinion on hunting. What was interesting is the past few years, we haven't seen a decline in Michigan, which we do all of their work for the Michigan Wildlife Council. So it's a little bit of a plug for wildlife councils, because on the backdrop of national studies, on individual state studies, we see sort of one or two bright spots, and Michigan is one of those. But I also want to point out, and why this is important, is that every year we do the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports Stakeholder Survey. And I'm hoping that every single person on this webinar now did that survey. But over those past few years, one of the things that's interesting is that when we ask about a whole bunch of different things on what's important for CAS to do, number one issue, hunting and cultural support and public opinion on hunting. They could be doing so much, and they do. And you all said they should be doing a lot, but again, the number one thing that you want them to do is to maintain and increase cultural support for hunting and shooting. The other thing, just as we get into this, couple things, I don't know if these are housekeeping, but, and you've probably heard me say this before, but cultural support for hunting is not the same as hunting participation. Sometimes we roll those into the same thing, and it sounds like a lot of really seasoned R3 people are on this, but just keep in mind that there's really two separate things. They're different. Obviously, the end result is the same, but they're different. And so maintaining public support for hunting is different from participation hunting, participation shooting. As you know, without cultural support for hunting, wildlife management is difficult. And if it got really bad, it would be impossible. The other thing is just language. As survey researchers, as a person who hires several people with English degrees, we're really cognizant of language. And so sort of be cognizant of that, the whole idea of approval versus support. And the way I would say that is approval suggests being okay with something, whereas support suggests sort of arguing on behalf of something. And so when Jim and I sat down and it's like, well, what do? We know there's something going on, but what is that? We wanted to determine the reasons. Jim's sort of already given you the bottom line for this, but at the time we didn't know. All we saw were decreases across the board. And so we wanted to figure out why. The other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to not just do research, we wanted to understand what is happening so that we can incorporate these into our programs, messages, and outreach initiatives. And it's going to turn out to be difficult, I think. But let me take you back. Let me take you back when I was a young man back in the 90s. I founded Responsive Management in 1990. I was actually worked for the Florida Game and Fish Commission at the time. They've since changed their name. But in 1990, we actually did start monitoring public opinion on hunting and a little bit on shooting. Now, you only see numbers up beginning in 1995 because to really compare stuff, you want to do it sort of the exact same way. So we've been doing that at various times with various people. As Jim said, he's been involved with this through Outdoor Stewards, NSSF, Hunters Leadership Forum, AFWA, Wildlife Management Institute. A lot of people have sponsored this research over the years. And we sort of bounced around. These are sort of within sampling errors. So yeah, we're not going to worry. We're not going to worry. All of a sudden, boom. Ooh, okay, yeah, what's going on here? Boom, we got another one. And these were pretty important because they were statistically significant. It was the first time since, the 011s and before that, we actually saw some statistically significant issues which said something is going on. I will say that the numbers that we're dealing with here, what we did for Jim, actually showed even another decline, but we didn't. But this research was done on behalf of what was previous. But we did see a decline again here, although this study was a little bit different than those. Let's take a look at trends in approval on recreational shooting. Real similar. We started this one in 2006 with the National Shooting Sports Foundation and then carried that on through the years as well. But again, boom, boom, boom. Well, is that horrific? Well, I don't know. If you were going to go to the doctor and he said, yeah, you got to watch your cholesterol. And then the next year, yeah, you better watch it. And it's like, hey, let's start watching this a little bit closer. And that's kind of what we're doing. But those declines in approval were 4.6 percentage points between here and there. And again, that is statistically significant. And you are allowed, as all health professionals and educators and everybody else, we can take those numbers and say, well, this percent equals this number of Americans. This is US adults. So we are allowed to say, well, this is actually about 11.6. So, round up to 12 million people where we're losing approval of recreational shooting.
When I saw that, right, you're 4%. Oh, okay, not a big deal. 11 million voting aged Americans, not just Americans, right? The key is they're adult Americans, and that makes a big difference for a lot of things that that affect our industry and our way of life.
And so let me just tell you briefly about methodology. I teach courses. I just taught one last week on methodology, and I could talk to you all day, but you wouldn't listen all day. But let me just give you an overview in terms of what it is that we did for this study. It was a really well-designed study. We had enough resources to do it right. We started out with a review on the existing research, what's happening. We did a bunch of really cool cross-tabulations that we put in the report. As Jim mentioned, we conducted focus groups across the nation, and we did this with people who said they had mixed to negative reactions on hunting and sport shooting and that it was declining. And we conducted those in each of the Fish and Wildlife Service regions. This is a highly scientific study. It's what we call a multimodal survey of US adult residents. That includes by cell phone, landline, although 90% of these were cell. We do texting, and we can talk about methodology if you want, but one of the things that I want to say on this is that 99% of our work, of our 1,200 projects, all of those projects and survey research are always focused on natural resource and outdoor recreation issues, but we do some political polling. I do that for universities. You've all heard the Quinnipiac poll or the Washington Post poll or New York Times poll. Well, people like us actually conduct those surveys. And in studies that we've done here in Virginia for the university system, using these methods, we are predicting elections in the last 4 presidential and gubernatorial elections, within 1 to 2 percentage points, within 1 to 2 percentage points of what really happened. So I want you to feel comfortable with what it is we do, and I want you to, more so, I want you to feel comfortable with these numbers. So blah, blah, blah. Let's talk about what we find, because that's why we're here. What I want to do is sort of put this in perspective in terms of what it is we were really looking at. This study was not really designed to say, okay, this percent think hunting or this. What we wanted to do is, I mean, it did, but that was sort of ancillary. What we really wanted to do is to measure what was happening on people who might have strongly approved and moved into neutral, or the other way around. Were there people who went moderately to neutral, or were there people who strongly approved into moderately disapproved, strongly disapproved to moderately disapproved? So as you read the report, hopefully we get you interested in reading that report, know that there's sort of this sliding scale, if you will, in terms of what's happening. So somebody could be neutral, hear something, okay, yeah, I guess I approve. But the point is that the attitudes toward hunting and stuff, a lot of these really sort of aren't fixed. There's people kind of moving here and moving there. And in this study, what we were able to identify is that about 16% of Americans are negative or becoming more negative in their opinions on hunting. And so there's some movement here. You'd rather have it move in the other direction, but it isn't. It's moving that. And those are the numbers that you see that there's a sort of a slight, decline in terms of that approval for hunting. And so this is sort of a pie graph that I made in terms of just to give you the big picture overview. One of the things that I want to do is take a look at it, and there's a lot of green there. And so, hey, your blood pressure is still good, but the doctors are saying, hey, keep an eye on that thing. Why don't you come in 6 months? Why don't you start exercising a little more? Stop with the salt and the potato chips and stuff, and eat all that gross stuff. Not that we're going to get personal here or anything. But anyway, so this, 16% here are people that we want to look in terms of these guys are moving in the wrong direction. The other thing is you look at numbers, there's a bunch of people who sort of neither approve nor disapprove or don't know. So keep in mind when you see my numbers, you're like 3 plus 3. Why are they saying 8 here? Because there's don't knows and neutrals. Well, the more important issue is who are those people? And so we did a bunch of crosstabs, and the people who are currently approving of hunting were becoming more negative. So these guys are approving. When I say guys, that is in the gender sense. They're more likely to be male, and they're moving in a direction that we don't want them to. There are people who are disapproving are becoming more disapproving. They're more likely to be female, and they're more likely to be Black or Hispanic. And I think that that's important when you put that in context, because what's happening is we're just seeing a shift. It's not, it's an interesting one, because if you've seen my stuff before, it's like, okay, well, males are more likely than females, Blacks or Hispanics are less likely. So there's a shift in sort of the wrong direction, if you will, among those groups. So we can do the same thing with attitudes towards sport shooting. Those attitudes, those approval ratings were moving in a higher negative direction than was hunting. 19% of Americans are negative or becoming more negative in their opinion of sport shooting. 4% are approving, and they haven't gotten there yet, but they're saying, yeah, I don't know, I might be becoming more negative. Whereas 15% currently disapprove and are sort of getting more negative. And so this is that same pie graph, although we have the 19% in here. Again, is our glass 65% full or 35% empty? Well, it's good. We want it to stay good. And that's why I give Jim an applause here to say, okay, let's start doing something now. Let's not wait.
Right.
So then the question is, well, who are those people? Who are those people who approve of sport shooting, become negative, and those who are negative now, but they're even getting worse? And again, that same pattern sort of held true. They were more likely to be older, and they're more likely to be Black or Hispanic. The people who are disapproving more, those groups, demographics, more likely to be female, more likely to be Black or Hispanic, and more likely to be urban or suburban. Okay, well, this is really interesting, because if you've heard our work on the National Shooting Sports Foundation's participation study that we do every other year, and we've been doing now for about 20 years, these are the groups that are more likely to pick up sport shooting, and they are driving a lot of the new gun ownership. Not all of it, but a good part of it, sort of those non-traditional audiences. So it's almost like there's these opposite sides of the spectrum, or they might even be related, that if they're getting negative about these things and they associate that with bad things, they might be more likely to own a gun. It might be something that we can look at in the future, but it's just an interesting observation. So now let's talk about sort of those general reasons for declining approval. And so, okay, well, if you've been around for 35 or 40 years, you've heard me say some of the most common reasons for becoming more negative about hunting and feeling that animals should not be killed. Okay, tell me something new. We've heard that, Mark, that hunting should not be done for recreation or for sport. Okay, yeah, we've heard you say that. But in this study, this reared its ugly head that hunting is perceived to worsen problems with firearms. Again, I haven't seen that in literally, 50, 60 studies on the topic. That one sort of reared its ugly head. The most common reasons for becoming more negative about sports shooting, by far the top reason, is perceived, again, perceived that firearms are linked to violence. And let's take a look at that. These are open-ended questions, so people could say anything they want. You've seen these before. These track pretty closely, but wow, pop. Remember that thing that you did as a kid where you put your finger in your mouth and went pop? And I haven't seen this. That hunting is perceived to worsen problems with firearms. Just sort of pops up in the past 3 or 4 years. In terms of opinions on target shooting, just overwhelming to violent links to violence. Again, nobody's saying this is true. We're measuring what's out there. And so we find out what's out there and then we do something about it. Let's talk about the effects of gun violence on attitudes toward hunting and sport shooting. And so the couple sort of general things I want to say is gun violence is a general issue of concern for many Americans. Everybody knows that. But it's even more concerning to those who have become more negative about hunting and sport shooting. This is where we're starting to link those two. And so let's take a look. And at the beginning of this survey, people didn't even know it was about hunting or shooting or anything. We wanted to know just things we've done before for other studies. But was wildlife populations or gun violence, where does that fall in terms of Americans' perceptions of issues or accounting for them? Well, it ranked pretty high. Affordable housing, we did this a couple months ago, and that was even more of an issue. Immigration, I mean, look at that. That's pretty amazing. And then so on. But I'm using this as a precursor to this because when you cross-tabulate it out of those who've become more negative about hunting or sport shooting, look how gun violence just goes straight up to the top. And I think that's interesting. Again, I'm not saying there's cause and effect here because it could be circular. I don't, that's not the point of the study. That we didn't know what we were going into on this. We know now a lot of these things, but we didn't know then. But concern about gun violence affects opinions on hunting and sport shooting. And let's take some specifics on that. And so once people knew we were talking about hunting and issues related to that, we outright asked, to what extent has concern about gun violence affected your opinion of hunting? A great deal, 90%, 11% moderate. I mean, 20% of the population out there is saying, wow, well, that is affecting. Look at sport shooting, even higher, with great deal and moderate amount at 26%. Those are big numbers. And remember, we're only dealing with 3, 4, 5% here in terms of that it's affecting it. But the seeds are out there for even lower numbers in the future, which I obviously hope we don't see.
I mean, this one, when you and I had gone through the report before, and you said 1 out of 4, right, are saying gun violence is affecting what I think of people that go, or recreational target shooting. Gun violence is affecting what I think about hunting. I mean, the relatively new phenomenon, right, since 2021, right? So we've still got time to reverse this scary trend, but we're going to have to act on that. And those are the things to keep in mind. We will have some positive stuff to talk about. I know we're scaring you now with a lot of bad numbers, but it's good to know this stuff so then we can now activate what we have recommendations for you coming a little later.
So let's take this number. So these are people who, this is the general population, 18 years old and older. And then let's do another and just run that by those who have become more negative. And again, you can see that incredible impact that that has on their opinion about hunting and gun violence. Again, we don't know cause and effect. A lot of this is chicken and the egg type of a thing. But again, just to show you how high these numbers become and how directly related they are to each other. So yeah, as Jim was saying, well, what the heck? First you do the research and then you figure out what to do about it. So how do we build support for hunting? Well, the most important thing is, how do we address this guilt by association? I think it's the center, it's the epicenter of this study. We're going to give you some other recommendations. I'm a researcher, not a communicator, and I know there's some great communicators in the audience. So I would say, help us out on this. How do you address that? I was going to say take scissors and snip that chain, but how do we take sort of something and just snip that off of here? Because we know it's not true. I can present you a lot of other research that shows that this isn't true. In fact, hunters are less associated with any kind of crime and stuff, but that's not the perception. So it's how do we do that? And so the first thing is we have to break this harmful link that hunting equals guns equals violence. Let's snip it there, not there, let's snip it there. And how do we do that? I'm not convinced we're there yet, but we know how to hit it from the sides, if you will. Because again, I'm not going to show you the research because of time and lots of numbers and something, but we need to emphasize that hunting is an important part of wildlife management. Again, I'm not just making this up. This is straight from the research. You've seen this in the book that we wrote called How to Talk About Hunting. You see me write about this, over and over in the future of hunting and shooting sports that we did in 07. These are the same things. Emphasize hunting as a key component of wildlife management. That will increase support for hunting. Emphasize hunters' role in funding wildlife conservation. Again, those will help start beating this from the sides. And emphasize that hunting is regulated specifically to ensure that wildlife populations remain stable and healthy. And those are really important words to use. But again, this one here, I think, in my opinion, these are coming from the sides. This is coming straight on, and I can't wait to hear people say, well, we should do this or do that, because I've been sort of beating my head against the wall on this. Similar, how do we build that support for sport shooting? Well, again, it's that same thing. How do we snip that harmful link? Now, I don't like that word snip. How do we break it? How do we chop it and throw it in the ocean? In terms of, well, sport shooting equals guns equals violence. We know that that is not true, but there's a percentage of people out there who think it, and they are transferring that on to their support for these activities that we know are so important. Well, how do we hit that from the sides? Well, safety. And you've heard the cliche of realtors, location, location, location. It's safety, safety, safety. When we look at the messages, that top-rated message in terms of favorable shooting is, hey, we want these people to be safe. We want to emphasize all of those aspects of safety. People not only being safe when they're out at the range, but that they feel safer in their house. And then again, communicate that sports shooters help fund wildlife conservation through their purchases of gun and ammunitions. We published a paper 3, 4, 5 years ago called The Precarious Position of Wildlife Conservation Funding, where we highlighted the importance of sports shooters to wildlife conservation. And so we're starting to, I'm hearing more and more people talk about that, which is really important. We need to figure out how to even leverage that even more.
I'm gonna interject there too. When we first did this, it didn't make any sense to me. Like, how could anybody think that way? There's no connection, between gun violence and hunting. We've all been here. A lot of people listening to this, watching this webinar, it might not make sense to you, but we can't think the way we think. We have to put ourselves in the positions of the general population, and we certainly can't blame them. They've come to this conclusion because there's only one narrative out there. And think about it yourself. When you see, when you watch the news, or are you seeing pro hunting things, pro gun things, or are you seeing, the opposite story? So you can't blame them. But now that we know that there's a problem, we are going to have to get in the game of communicating to the general population.
Good point. So things to keep in mind. One of them is, you've heard us talk about this over the years, but wow, did this research confirm that photos of hunters posing with harvested game, even when done respectfully, can turn people against hunting. I mean, even the most innocuous photos seem to turn a lot of people off. I'm one to be always sending friends pictures. Hey, look at my Grand Slam turkey. Look at my my Iceland caribou. Look at this. Look at all these speckle-bellied geese that we got, blah. But, you start posting that stuff, and in hunter to hunter is one thing, but hunter to non-hunter is another. In the focus groups, we had a very benign picture of a woman with a turkey. Like, really, I was like, wow, this is really nice. This makes me feel happy. Jim, you want to make some points on that one? It was like, no, they didn't even like that. And if they
It
didn't like that,
almost,
like, what?
again, doesn't make sense to everybody here. We all post photos and, love sharing them, but um, the general population, and not the far one way or the far the other way, but in general, and Mark can get into, animal rights versus animal welfare versus dominionistic, some research on it. But again, from a focus group, when we showed that picture to the focus group people, one of the responses was, I don't get it. Well, what don't you get? They go, I go to Costco and I get my rotisserie chicken. I do not hold it up and put a picture on social media. Like, what's the point? It feels like you know, you're making fun of that animal, or you're, over it some way. So Mark, I don't know if you want to go into that, if you're going to talk about that. I know with so
I
many things we can
am,
talk
but
about
oh
here.
man, but you gotta say what they said. Remember, they said the guy it was pretty hilarious. I don't remember if it was a guy or a woman or what. The guy goes, well, I don't take a selfie when I buy a frozen turkey. It's like, again, after 40 years, you're still learning stuff. So keep that in mind. And again, what level that is, we're okay. But okay, so I'm going to show you a whole bunch of data. I'm not going to go through all of it, but I want to make this point is that we asked a lot of questions to people. Everybody didn't get every question. These were randomly assigned, and they weren't in this order. But I just want to sort of show you at the top of the list here in terms of things that people agreed or disagree with, things we were like, okay, what can we do? Posting a photo to social media of an animal has been hunted does not show respect for wildlife. And as we were just saying in terms of Jim, it's like, well, okay, yeah, but here's the point, and we put this in the book, How to Talk About Hunting. It was just a really cool study that we've done for Hunters Leadership Forum on animal rights and animal welfare about, I don't know, now about a decade ago. But this stuff's really important that I need to interject here. And so you've seen our work in terms of that there's a continuum of animal rights, animal welfare, and dominionism. Animal rights, animals have rights like humans and should not be used anyway. 14% of Americans. Now, we don't, that one's still a conundrum to me because only about 4% of Americans don't eat meat, but they think that animals should have rights even though they eat them. Now, I'm being a little facetious, but the point is that about 14% of Americans hold that value. In that big middle, 82% of Americans say that animals can be harmed by humans, can be used by humans, excuse me. Animals can be used by humans as long as the animal does not experience undue pain and suffering. Okay, that's where your majority is. On the other side, the other extreme side is that we labeled it a dominionism label, is that animals can be used by humans regardless of the animal's welfare or rights. And so if you post a photo, and I don't think anybody here is going to, but if you see these photos of somebody standing with their foot on the animal, if they're jumping up and down on, on a dead carcass, if they're showing disrespect, what message is that sending? Is that sending, as long as the animal does not experience undue pain and suffering? Well, it's dead, but it's sort of saying that you're not really, showing that respect that animal should have. So yeah, go ahead and post those pictures and you'll appeal to 4% of Americans. And what is the opposite of that? Well, you got 96% out there that aren't going to gonna accept that. And that goes for even words that we use. And I don't need to get into this because you've seen me lecture on this before, but kill them and grill them. If it flies, it dies. If it's brown, it's down. And just that disrespect is hurting us. It's not cool. Maybe to a teenager it's cool, but in general, that is not helping the sport that we love so much. So those social media posts are having an impact. And let's take a look. These are people who have used social media. 25% of people who use social media, it's about half of people use social media every single day, said that they have seen social media posts that they found offensive. Those are big time numbers. Have you ever seen a social media post about firearms or target shooters? You didn't see that. And so again, it sort of goes back to this, the respect for animals that is so incredibly important, not just in research, but personally in our own personal values. A couple other things, just other things that came out, things that we've seen before, but I think are worth mentioning. Two harmful misperceptions that wildlife doesn't need to be managed. We continue to see that. We need to continue to fight that. And one that, again, upwards of 40% of Americans think that hunting causes some species to become endangered. And that's not the way we word that. We word that question as hunting under the legal system, blah, 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 causes some species to become endangered. I mean, when was market hunting from, 1850s and 1900s was a heyday, and 125 years later, it's still sticking with us, it seems like. I don't know, but the point is that these things still are there in their underlying currents. And then finally, sort of this, I don't know, maybe this is ending on a whimper here, but things to keep in mind is that in every study we've done on this, knowing a hunter or sport shooter matters. You do a study and you say, well, we're going to ask about, do you support or oppose hunting? Do you support or oppose shooting? And then we start cross-tabulating it by age, race, gender, geography. And what are those things that are going to come up on top? What are the variables that are most important? White, rural, male. Wow, Mark, you're a genius. How much did we pay for that study? Well, yeah, but if you interject, do you know a hunter? That comes to the very top. And it supersedes white, rural, male on both hunters and sport shooters. The point being that I've hunted with a lot of people, I've shot with a lot of people, and there's some people say, I don't really talk to people about it because I don't want to get crap from people and whatever. I love doing this. I just going out and doing it. And I don't think that that's a good attitude, because here we are talking about this misperception that hunting and shooting is related to some kind of gun violence. Well, if all my nieces and nephews, and I have a ton of them these days after Thanksgiving and Christmas, know, Uncle Mark hunts, Uncle Bill hunts, and all my uncles and some of my aunts hunt, those are good people. I don't hunt, but I like them. And so, okay. So there are little things that we can do, I think, to help. And one of those is to show people that we are ethical, that we do hunt, and that we do care about wildlife. So again, sort of big picture overview on that. And thanks for listening. Hopefully I didn't talk too long or too fast. So let me sort of turn that back over to Jim.
Yeah, well, thanks, Mark. And I know there is a ton more. That was just top line information. So there's a full report that we'll posted at outdoorstewards.org. I believe Lance will be posting this webinar to the council's YouTube page. And always, feel free to call Mark or myself for more information on it. But, again, it's a new phenomenon. It's only been a couple years where we lost these millions of people. We can win them back with positive messages that had been identified in this. And, Outdoor Stewards Conservation Foundation was formed to help promote those positive contributions of hats, hunters, anglers, trappers, and shooters, as well as the outdoor industry and the wildlife agencies. We know we do a lot of great things. We know we clean up the environment. We know we fund conservation. We know we can feed ourselves and our friends and family and those less fortunate. But we don't know how to communicate that, or we really haven't been tasked with communicating that to the general population. Wildlife agencies are focused on managing wildlife, and now the last 5 years, the word relevancy has come about. So we're not really winning the relevancy battle. So if we want to remain relevant, we've definitely got to start communicating outside the choir. Don't have to stop communicating inside, but we certainly need to expand some of these messages out to the general population. And same goes for the outdoor industry or media. Anybody involved in this, expand your efforts. If you're already promoting those positive contributions, go ahead and expand them. Continue on with them. If you're not doing them, again, we've got programs. Fill a bag while filling your tag. Biodegradable, reusable bags that are distributed to hats across America. We ask them when they're outdoors, clean up a piece of garbage, but tell people about it. Post it to your social media. We're working with Wildlife Management Institute on the Outdoor Industry Communication Council, where we're providing a lot of those content on good, positive messages that you can just grab on our website as well. And to me, one of the best ways to change people's minds is, the hunters feeding the hungry in America. One of the quickest ways to change people's minds, in my opinion, is that message there. And, there's a lot of information on that all, just by Googling hunters feeding the hungry, go to the NRA's National Wild Game Meat donation page, go to Donate a Deer on Outdoor Stewards, find information on that. Great story to tell, great story to share. And we've all got, plenty of information on the millions of meals and leading the way, helping solve the hunger crisis in America. And lastly, we've got a program called Connecting with Conservation, where it really focuses on three groups: wildlife agencies, NGOs, and the outdoor industry. And we, have some videos out there that, explain how conservation is funded, and also working with Wildlife Management Institute and Mr. Scott Lavin here on a podcast with the same name, Connecting with Conservation. And you can find that by Googling on a YouTube or going to podcast and searching for Connecting with Conservation podcast. And again, we have guests on there from industry, agency, NGOs, media. If you'd like to be a guest, just reach out to me or Scott. And again, spread the word, start to take action. We can change this, but not individually. We're going to have to change it together. And another way we can do that, if Lance wants to take over, is by playing this video to your. I'll let Lance play it first, and we'll get into it.
We are the keepers of the wild, America's original and most invested conservationists. For more than 80 years, we've been committed to conserving wildlife and the natural landscapes that define our nation. From rugged alpine ridgelines to peaceful tall grass prairies, we've supported the conservation of more than 36 million acres of American wildlands. Our funding has led to cleaner water, fresher air, and improved wildlife habitat. From abundant fish and waterfowl populations to robust deer and elk herds, nothing is more important than maintaining wild spaces for adventurers to explore and wildlife to thrive. We are America's hunters and target shooters, stewards of the American outdoors.
All right, so that public service announcement is an actual public service announcement that was distributed to 11,000 radio and television stations starting in September 2024. And in just the past 4 months or so, it has gained $4 million in earned media, 160 million impressions, importantly, to the general population. It is not, it certainly can be used to preach to the choir, and it is available on our website. If you want to post it to your social media or on your websites or on your newsletters, go ahead and you can grab that and use it, or make content similar to that. Again, start promoting these great positive contributions we have that are out there. And you can find a lot of those things on outdoorstewards.org. And I believe, now is time for a little question and answer. If there's anything in the chat, I'll let Scott take over that.
Yeah, Jim, thanks to both of you. Really excellent presentation. And of course, there's no surprise that we have some very well thought out questions by the attendees. I apologize. We cannot turn on the chat at this point with the way we structured this webinar because of the size of the audience. Please forgive us that. But so the first question is this because of the bias of people seeing only what algorithms, that's a lot of syllables, want them to see, and content that reinforces currently held opinions?
Miss Wisniewski, good question, but I think it's a combination. Obviously, on social media, we see what we want, but the general news, right? That's there's no algorithm when you turn on the news, right? If you still watch the old TV thing on the wall. In addition to that, right? I mean, the few, hopefully less and less posts that are dominionistic, they are great fundraisers. A lot of people are seeing those. It's unintended consequence because groups that are opposed to have an opposite position to what we talked about today are grabbing those photos and grabbing those videos and using them to fundraise. And you may have, everything from, historically Cecil the lion to, the wolf that, may have got run over by a snowmobile. Again, not hunting, but they equate that to hunting, and they're winning the cultural acceptance battle. So we need to start to tell our stories.
Good point. Next, anecdotally, I've heard people say that they do not like hunting hunters because they dump garbage and shoot up appliances, etc., on public lands. I'm curious to learn how other recreational user groups feel about hunters and hunting.
Yeah, that's a good point. We see that too. We actually see that more with anglers in the work we've done with fishing, where a lot of the fishing sites and public areas just get completely trashed. I think that's probably because there's more of a concentration of anglers at boat launches and fishing spots and stuff like that. But it's a great point. I mean, the number one complaint about hunters in terms of negativity is the trespassing issue. You may remember a few years ago, we did a fairly major study for NSSF on access. And wow, trespassing, leaving gates open is a real concern of a lot of people, and it's really hurting us. And those really are, in a lot of ways, two good questions. I don't know if we have, certainly Jen's question about that is I would have answered it, well, I don't know. I don't know if those are algorithms. I don't know yet in terms of how this is happening, because we didn't, again, a year ago when we started this, we didn't know that this is what we would come to. We have no idea. So I wish we did, because then we could carry it and have gone even more in depth. But this first part of it was like, well, what's happening and why? But it's a really good question to answer. I would say to the audience, we have a lot of people here, to be cognizant of that even in your own life, is as you look around, it's like, what kind of messages am I hearing? Why is there this connection? It's, maybe it's just organic. Oh, a hunter has a gun equals violence, hunting is bad. I don't know yet what the progression of that is in terms of ending up where they are. It's a great question.
A few bad apples, right? Mark had done a study for us, I think in 2023 as well, and we added a couple questions in there to the general population and hats. Have you ever taken somebody else's trash out of the woods or waters? And guess what? Hunters and anglers have a higher percentage of them take other people's trash out of the woods and waters, but those aren't the stories that anybody shares. If only there was a program that somebody start, giving out biodegradable bags, and people would promote the fact that they're cleaning up nature while they're outdoors. We've got to, get past these, news stories about, oh, look at what happened to this public land, shooting up a refrigerator. So let's, hey, state agencies, you've got, communication tools to tell people to do that. And I think you got people with badges too. Maybe start making examples of some of these people that you catch polluting. And, as, I've heard somebody say, nobody likes a litter bug, right? So let's promote those positive things about we are the number one way, we manage habitat, we clean up the environment, but we don't tell other people about it.
Okay, we got a lot of questions to get to, so let's keep moving. When discussing sports shooting, what was it specifically firearm based, or did it include archery as well?
Firearm based.
Firearm based, okay. Studies show increase of domestic gun violence in rural areas with the start of deer season. I had not heard that.
Yeah, I saw that too. I think that was a Princeton University study. Having gone to Yale, I can make fun of people at Princeton. So that was a bad study, and I think that that's something that we'd all should look at. That was a bad study, even though it was from a Ivy League university. So I think we should look at that. Maybe Scott or Lance or Jim, let's take a look at that and get some information out on it, because that was a very widespread piece of research that when you started to dig into it was really ridiculous. I mean, heck, I did a study. I'm going to be fun and facetious here. I did a study and I interviewed all sorts of football fans, and 99% of them agreed that the refs were biased in the other team's favor. You see the irony in that. That's supposed to be funny. So I can tell you that there's a statistical link between eating ice cream from an outdoor vendor and crime. Well, of course, it's warmer and stuff. And so I'm just being kind of silly here, but you see these relationships that you can say are statistically true, but they're just not connected. So, I'm really glad somebody brought that up, because I saw that. I got a lot of questions on it, and quite honestly, I was busy. I looked at it and I was like, this is not good, and then moved on. But the fact that other
And
people,
one of the other things, and you alluded to it before, if we want to, tell a different side of the story, we do have a lot of studies and a lot of proof showing that firearms, are safe. It is very safe to go hunting and target shooting, and the whole self-defense thing is, a pretty good safety argument as well.
And Jennifer kind of points out that, currently it's kind of tough to see a gun on social media these days, even. So that messaging, good or bad, you're really not seeing that product. But Tom very accurately points out he's been very critical of branding in recent years, specifically with the bow hunting industry, and some of the images and the names of brands, blood sport arrows, etc. That this does not represent us well, right? And they're propagating the wrong images of hunting and hunters. And do you guys see a linkage with what you've been researching to that?
I can't say there's a linkage, but it's a really good. Is that Tom Decker? Is that true?
Tom Rowell out of Washington.
Okay. Well, it's a really good observation, and it's a disconcerting one, because what hunting and a lot of fishing is in recreational shooting is all about is not what's portrayed. People want to portray, advertisers sell what I guess sells. I don't sell magazines, so, but putting a big trophy buck on every single cover of every single magazine, well, it makes you feel like, well, my buck wasn't that big, or oh, that must mean all hunters get all big bucks, or hey, that number one reason is to get a big trophy buck. I mean, we all go for that, but we have been concerned for years about this whole idea of portraying something that it isn't. And it's, again, we all want one. We all want one, and it's great for it to happen, but to consistently put together things like that, is sending out messages that we probably don't want to. And that is the difference, though, between media, even if it's our media, hunting, shooting, fishing, and our profession as state agency people and NGOs and conservationists. There's some push me, pull you there. So
And that does proves the point of, you can, if that's your constituency, if that's your group, there's a certain percentage of very tactical people, right? And if the ad is tactical, that's fine. But keep in mind, we want to have, we want to reach out. You can do two things at the same time. You can have your ad to your specific audience, but we also want to promote, to a larger audience about the positives of doing whatever you're doing, whether it's, archery, hunting, or whatever the fact is. Tell the whole story post a photo of here's, my harvest, but here's the family meal with it as well, or here's me at the donation center helping the local food pantry.
Yeah. So guys, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We schedule it an hour. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch gears and close out our portion of the webinar, and then I will circle back and we can review the questions. Mark said he's snowbound. There's no snow here in Arizona, but I'm really interested. So I want to see this, that we have a few more good questions. But Lance, if you could bring up our slide just real quick. I really want to thank Jim and Mark for being willing to work with the council to collaborate for this webinar. If you found this topic enlightening and or stirring, I'd like you to remind you that we're finalizing the agenda for the National R3 Symposium, May 19th to the 22nd in Portland, Maine. And that registration should be opening up just in a few days on the 14th. Also, besides just the R3 Symposium, if you'd like to do one of these webinars or a case study with the council, please reach out to me or any council staff, and we'd love to work with you. I think this topic was highly value added, and I want to thank our partners for today's topic. And then with that, I'll switch gears back to questions. I really like this next question. I don't know if your data gets to this level of detail, but are there questions to differentiate the type of hunting? For example, is archery hunting more acceptable versus rifle? Does location matter? Deer hunt in Michigan versus Africa, and draft hunt in Africa?
Yeah, great question. We don't have it in this study, but in other studies that we've done for the Hunters Leadership Forum in the book, How to Talk About Hunting, we have that data. In studies that we've done over the years for WMI, Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, we do have that. So if you haven't seen it, I can certainly just give a big, broad overview, is that absolutely, when I talk about support or approval for hunting, that's just the surface. That number goes up and down based on species, hunting for deer versus hunting for wolves or bear or mountain lion, by motivation, by technique. And the way that I like to explain that, because it's an obvious one, is when was the last time that you saw a ballot initiative or a referenda to stop hunting deer for meat? Well, never. When was the last time you heard of a ballot initiative to stop spring bear, trophy bear hunting? Remember that word, I don't want to get into words at work because that's a whole nother webinar and seminar that we've done with the project we did with Steve Williams when he was with the Wildlife Management Institute. But those words matter. And think about the word trophy. I'm gonna haunt you for the rest of your life, because every time you hear an anti-hunter, they're going to talk about trophy this or trophy that. We're going to stop trophy bear hunting. We're going to stop trophy this. I mean, you could hunt rabbits, or as Elmer Fudd said, wabbits, and they're going to tie trophy to that. We're going to stop trophy wabbit hunting. And so you're going to think of me when you hear that but there's a reason why, whereas 83% of Americans support hunting deer, 36, 37, 38% of Americans support trophy hunting, whatever that means. And again, we've written chapters in that book on that. So what a great question. Wow, what a great audience. You guys are asking great questions.
They're killing it, aren't they? I will
Yeah.
say, coming to you from Arizona, our jacks are considered big game. So there's that. Just for
Well,
this next one is really amazing, and I think it definitely needs to be voiced. Person says, I think there's a stereotype that all hunters are conservative and right wing, but many in our department are progressive. How do we break this stereotype? That's an amazing question. I don't know if you guys touch on that.
It's an amazing question. And we have data on that, because we're always asked that right around election time. We're always asked that by reporters, what percent of hunters are, right wing, left wing, middle of the road and stuff. And I'd say there's 2 or 3 things. One is getting that research out, and maybe even before next election, which probably is going to come around faster than you think, but feels like a million years away. Didn't we just go through an election? I think we did. But let's do some stuff where we can say, 30, 40% of hunters or shooters are Democrats. In fact, when I start talking about that, it starts opening up sort of pieces in my brain. But one of the things that we saw in the NSSF study on who the groups that were more likely to be new at target shooting and gun sales were Democrats. So, and so we have data on that. There was another point on that that slipped by me. So, but from a Democrat
Yeah.
Republican side of things, so we do have that data. The other thing, here's the other thing that I would say is, and this is something that stuck with me for 25 years, and maybe if you've heard me talk before, I've said it, but I think it's really powerful. We were doing a focus group in Richmond, Virginia, and it was with Black women on why Black women were less likely to fish than other demographics. And we saw that, and it was for RBFF or something a long time ago. But afterwards, a really wonderful Black woman came up to me and said, Mark, we talked a lot about this, talked a lot about that, but it comes down to one thing. You buy things that look like you. You buy things that look like you. So the question is let's take all the magazine covers. Let's, people stereotype all the time, but what kind of person does that look like? I mean, I'm just saying, do a little bit of just fun mystery shopping and see, look at our own stuff. How are we portraying ourselves as, what I'm saying with this. The point is you buy things that look like you connect with things that look like you. So are we guilty of stereotyping hunters or sport shooters? Now, I will say that I think we've gotten a lot better in the past 10 or 15 years. I mean, go back into the early 90s or 2000s, and it's just like, oh, come on, guys, let's not do that. But so I think we've done a lot better. But again, what a great question. And again, I think it's an important point that I want to make on that is that what image are we as an industry and as a profession sending people? So great point.
I'll chime in on going back to the trophy hunting. That's a great example of trophy hunting. That term was not a problem 20 years ago, right? It was Cecil Lyon that opened up the floodgates on that. And when there was only one side of the story about how bad all trophy hunters are from, anti-hunting groups, well, you see what happened, right? You saw that now it's, 35%, 40% of the population approves of that. So we don't want that to happen again with gun violence turning, people against hunting and stuff. So it is definitely time to act. So great point with, bringing up the trophy hunting there, Mark. And then, as far as, the last topic there, it scrolled past, but I know you had some points on that. And of course, I already came and went with mine. So I guess we'll get on to the next question there, Scott.
Well, but let me just, but that it's important because those words do matter. And I do think there's always, it's really important to be self-reflective on the words that we use. I mean, even we talked about trophy hunting, but even sport hunting. I mean, sport hunting has a history behind it. I mean, sport hunting was initiated by early phenomenal conservationists, but it was used to separate sport hunting from market hunting. Sport hunting being good, market hunting being bad. Now the current connotations of what sport hunting is chasing something down in an unfair situation, blah, 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 blah. So again, the words that we use are incredibly important.
Absolutely agree. So moving first, I'm monitoring the participants, and we're still holding at a good number. So I'm going to keep this going as long as the attendance holds. Next is a comment on the public service announcement. There were no people with firearms in the PSA. They did not look like hunters, and it had no safety/not violent message. So
what's a hunter look like? I think we already covered that. Anybody can look like a hunter. So that was a curious, I guess, note or mention by somebody, but there's give and take, right? In a perfect world, we have, guns and control an animal harvested, but you can't do, there's certain criteria with public service announcements. If you want to do a true one to reach the general population, 11,000 radio and TV stations, $4 million in earned media, 160 million impressions in 4 months. I think it's about at least in my 15 years, I've never seen anything reach the general population like that. And with a message that is, informational and will pique curiosities, but it's the start, right? We've got a lot more planned. We just learned a lot more with this. So, great opportunities. There's, a hunting dog at the end. There's two guys in camo at the end. And then there's a link to, find more information. So there's definitely, you can't do exactly everything you want to. A Super Bowl ad with Cabela's and Bass Pro, they couldn't show guns a couple of years ago. Ducks Unlimited, Wings Over Water is a conservation video, not a hunting video. But we're in the right direction. We know that this works. We know that we can get a huge return and reach a large audience that needs to be reached with positive messages. And again, cleaning up the environment, feeding the hungry, great messages that we can develop future communications too.
Jim, was that a conscious decision not to put a guy with a gun in there?
There's 11,000 radio and TV station managers that have a decision to either accept it or not accept it, and there's criteria that you can or can't do. So the suggestion from the organization that puts together $1 billion worth of earned media for Red Cross and all these companies, suggested not to put a firearm in there or a dead animal, right? And that would give it a better chance of getting picked up by those 11,000 radio and TV stations, all an individual decision by a station manager. The good news is that the great look and feel of that video was picked up by a huge amount of stations across the country. Again, this publicly traded company that's distributing it was very impressed with how many people picked it up. They've never seen anything like it before. So I think we're on to something good there.
Okay, we'll do one more, guys. I think we're starting to trail off here. So the next one is an excellent point. Some people have no problem buying meat from a supermarket or restaurant, but view hunting is different. Any chance of helping them understand that hunting is generally more ethical than factory farming? That's a big question.
What a great, maybe a great way to end it. Although I don't know, I kind of like this idea. I may go to the groceries if I can get out. I can get out because it's snowing. I'm gonna go take a picture, a selfie with me and a frozen turkey and put it up. I'm gonna send it to everybody. Like, yeah, Mark's lost it. No, I just love that. It's a selfie with a frozen turkey. But in a serious way, that's incredibly important. We can get you the sponsored book, How to Talk About Hunting, where we talk a lot about that. But that whole idea of organic meat, again, Peter Churchborn has done some really cool stuff with the Hunters for the Hungry program and the messaging on that, feeding the hungry. Number one reason people support hunting is hunting for the meat. And if you connect that with food insecurity, which has become a phrase over the past few years, I mean, it's a real, how do you argue against that? That people talk about 80-20 issues. Have you heard about those in politics? That's like a 98% too. Like, who's gonna go against that? But there's some really good data in that Hunters for Hungry that they did that shows the importance of organic meat, less fat, and other things. So what a great way to end it. I guess for the people on the West Coast, it's lunchtime. But there's some really good data out there that can help them distribute it in terms that eating game meat is better for you. There's less hormones. I mean, when I bring back meat from a hunt and I talk to people about having them try it, it's not just, well, this is really good to eat. This sandhill crane is the ribeye of the sky. This is phenomenal. Okay, yeah. But hey, it's sort of guilt-free meat. And so I think there's some really positives there as well that we could probably do something with.
I'll add to that, in the presentation, Mark, you touched on only 4% of Americans don't eat meat, right? So, and if we're only at 76% as of the last, approval of hunting, well, I can see we're not going to change 4% of people's minds that don't eat meat. That leaves us 20% times 2.5 million voting aged Americans. So we've got 50 million folks out there that we can change their opinions, and I think we can. I don't, see any reason why, if we start promoting the positive contributions, have two sides of the story, so there's not just one, anti hunting story out there that we can change some minds. But again, if you're not doing it, start doing it. Reach out to Mark or I or Scott, and we'll help you any way we can.
That's a great close, Jim. I want to thank Jim Curcuruto and Mark Duda again for a really impactful presentation. I want to thank Lance Cherry for making sure that you were able to view this uninterrupted and all the messaging and videos worked well. Thank you for your comments. I think we can all agree this topic is this isn't the last we've heard of this. Some of us are going to see each other at the North American and AFWA and the National R3 Symposium. I think we'll have many opportunities to continue to discuss this. But thank you guys for your work and thank the audience for attending. Everybody, have a great day.